In this module, we're going to expand the theoretical and conceptual toolkits that you've been developing over the past couple of weeks for analyzing media and communication texts, and begin looking at the concepts of framing, genre, and intertextuality. Now, we've already begun the process of talking about these concepts in previous weeks, particularly when we were looking at paradigm and syntagm, denotation and connotation, and binary opposition. And when you were doing the class activities around these concepts and analyzing the various texts for their connotative meaning and exploring binary oppositions, you almost couldn't help yourselves by drawing on a broader framework for interpreting the text. So bringing in already existing knowledge of our photograph of Peter Dutton, for argument's sake, or talking about other texts that represented women in a patronizing and demeaning way. So you're already, again, once again demonstrating your ability as natural semioticians by engaging in extratextual framing, exploring the context around which media products circulate, and exploring intertextuality by relating the text that you've been analyzing to other similar texts. And we demonstrated that really nicely when we were looking at the range of memes that had been generated in response to the Peter Dutton photograph that we looked at in class. This week, we're going to explore those concepts that allow us to expand not only our understanding of what a text is, but expand our understanding of how a text operates by exploring the ideas of context, so the social and cultural context that a media text circulates within, how it is framed in relation to other texts, not only other texts that refer to itself. So for argument's sake, we can talk about Game of Thrones, but we then will talk about Game of Thrones, the TV series, the book, merchandise, etc., including what you might say about it online. Genre plays an important role here in framing how we approach a particular media text and how we might think about the media texts that we encounter. And finally, exploring the idea of intertextuality, which is the notion of interpreting media texts in relation to other texts which they might refer to, might draw on for imagery, or be connected to in some way. Now, we know that for any text to make sense, it has to draw on an established set of shared meanings. So going back to that idea, which hopefully is really familiar to you now, of media texts and how we interpret them being shaped by codes and conventions which are established through shared meanings. So that means texts never function independently of each other. So there is always some sort of connection relationship between the media text that we're interpreting in any particular moment. So any context which we're investigating simply becomes another text which requires interpretation. Now, taken to its logical extreme, that means that we can only ever know or only ever understand the world textually. So this is again one of those tricky ideas that takes a bit of time to get your head around. But for a semiotician, the world exists only as a series of texts, and we analyze, we make sense of the world, we go through the world, we're able to live in the world only because we have the ability to read those texts, interpret those texts, relate any individual text that we're exposed to at a particular moment, relate that text to other texts and make sense of the world as a coherent whole. And of course, that context of reception, the context in which we read or interpret any media text, is going to be influenced by a whole range of things. The physical setting, our social class, our gender, our race or cultural background, they're all going to play a very important role in establishing the context of reception and the meanings that we bring to any media text. For example, how might we behave when we go to an art gallery? It would be quite restrained, quite polite. We would be quiet. If we were going to talk to our friends or someone that we were with, we'd probably whisper. We certainly wouldn't be loud or draw attention to ourselves, and we certainly wouldn't crowd surf, would we? So depending on the context in which we're reading any particular media text at any particular time, our behaviors change. So we would behave very differently at a gig compared to an art gallery. And of course, understanding context is actually quite a sophisticated process, because we know that Netflix and chill doesn't really mean Netflix and chill. So the context in which we understand any media product is always being modified by our ongoing relationship with other texts. So, for argument's sake, when we watch an Avengers film or a film featuring any one of the individual characters from the Avengers franchise, so whether it be the Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, we're always, as audiences, making connections between the film we're watching now and other films in the franchise that we might have seen. Or if you had been to the Gallery of Modern Art and seen the Avengers exhibition featuring all these some of the costumes, the sets, the props from the Avengers films, you might also be relating your experience of the movie to what you saw at Goma. So being able to look at Tony Stark's Iron Man suit and then say, oh, I saw a version of that when I went to Goma. So we're always relating our interpretations of media texts to other media texts that we've been exposed to. So that means any individual media text or media product doesn't have a unified meaning which is determined by a single context. So media and our interpretations of media always take place within multiple and varied contexts, and that produces multiple and varied meanings.